Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be sharing my 25 books to read in 2025 list. So we are just about in business when it comes to my library. It's been a little bit of a saga, but my sister-in-law's father came over, I want to say 2 weeks ago now, and he fixed my bookshelves so they are now even and level, which is really exciting because in an old Victorian house, there are many sloping floors, which was a problem that I was not anticipating. I thought I was just gonna build my bookshelves, put up my books, and bam, be done. But that was not the case. It was so much more involved than I ever could have expected. So I'm like infinitely grateful that he did all of that for me, and the only payment was a couple of drinks, which was super nice. With that being said, like, this is where I'm going to be sitting. I haven't 100% decided on where I'm gonna like keep books on my shelves. I think I like what I have going on right now, but I still am in my like arranging kind of period, and I have a lot of shelves, which is really nice. I have 4 big shelves behind me. I have 4 half shelves in front of me that way. I have 2 TBR cards. I have 2 more tall shelves across from me and a third one that I have to build, but I have to move the light switch outside of the room before we build that one because it will be blocked by the shelf. So I'm like waiting to assemble that one. But so I've got a good amount of space. It's just a matter of figuring out what I want, where I want to keep things. But I'm so excited to finally have this room in a really good place because it would have been the first thing that I would have set up, but it just took so long. And then apologies for not making any other videos. I caught a cold like the week after Thanksgiving and I was sick for like a couple of weeks. I still am like coughing a tiny bit here and there, even though I've been better for a while. And then Andrew and I hosted Christmas in our new house. And then one day after Christmas, all of Andrew's family came. We basically hosted a second Christmas. And I'm not talking about like casual, let's order pizza. Like I cooked, I want to say 6 trays of stuffed shells, salads, vegetables. I made 8 different kinds of cookies, like Christmas cookies. So it was a very involved week. And then we essentially also had a third Christmas with leftovers for my family who we all live in town with now. So we've just had so much hosting going on. I've been so exhausted and I've basically been spending this whole week hibernating and working on setting up my 2025 bullet journal. I'm really pleased with my reading spreads, but anyway, sorry, I didn't realize what a long tangent that would be to just catch you up on everything going on and give you a little insight into my library, but here we are. So the point of this video is to tell you the 25 books that I want to read in 2025. And this is a bit unusual for me because I had been making lists. First, I had been doing like the this many books to read in this year kind of list. And then I was like, this is getting overwhelming. And I ended up switching to just 12 in whatever year. However, this year, my main focus is really to read a lot of really big sci-fi, fantasy, like really long books, really get caught up on series that I love. And this list is basically just full of adult science fiction and fantasy. I ended up making like 5 different lists for myself of 12 books to read in 2025 in my journal. So I have a list of 12 for adult fantasy. I have a list of 12 for adult sci-fi. I have a list of 12 for adult SFF sequels. I have a list of 12 for 12 like YA/more cozy adult fantasy, not necessarily like that it's classified as cozy but doesn't feel like epic kind of fantasy. I included in that list like those like Rebecca Ross books, the like A River Enchanted, like that kind of book is on that list. And then I also made a list of 12 romance books to read and a list of 12 thrillers to read. For the point of this list, I pulled out the 25 that I'm most excited for, and all of them are SFF books. So not surprising since that's really what I'm like focused on and what I'm most excited to read. Another thing that you'll notice is that I do have a good amount of sci-fi on this list, and that's because I used to love reading sci-fi so much, and I don't know why, but I just like severely decreased the number of sci-fi books that I read per year, and I really want to change that. I really want to get back into reading more sci-fi, and I feel like there are a bunch of sci-fi books and series that are like quintessential sci-fi reads that I haven't yet read, and I do really want to get to those this year and really prioritize reading them. So basically my philosophy is going to be quality over quantity. I'm not going to be focused on how long something's going to take me. If I end up reading like 3 books in a month instead of my usual like 10 to 12 because I'm reading really long books, as long as I liked them, that's going to be great and I will consider that a win. Now, for real, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be reading in 2025. First on my list is Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. This is like an epic fantasy. It was originally written as a standalone, but people like just adored this book so much and basically begged M.L. Spencer for more. So it took her a really long time, but she did end up writing a sequel. I don't know when it's coming out or anything. She, I think, is still working on it, but she did like finally feel like she came up with a really good idea for a second book. So I'm glad that she decided to continue, but I definitely want to have this one under my belt before news of that second one comes out. So I'm really looking forward to this. I mean, who doesn't love dragon fantasy and adult epic fantasy? I just have the highest hopes for this one, and I have this beautiful Kickstarter edition which I am like totally in love with. It's super gorgeous, so very excited for this. I think this book might also be on Kindle Unlimited, so if it's one that you're interested in and you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can get the ebook, just borrow it, which is pretty nice. This is actually the original cover, which I really love. Next on my list is Once There Were Heroes by Philip C. Quantrell. I feel like people have just been going nuts for Philip Quantrell in the last like year, specifically for the Echoes saga, which I do also really want to read, but I got these really pretty editions from the Broken Binding, and these take place before the Echoes saga series. There's like 9 books in that series, so it's a pretty long one, but I definitely want to read these first, and I think it'll give me a good foundation for the worlds. There's only 2 of them. It's a duology, so there's this one, and I actually have the second one over here too, which is In the Shadow of Kings, and this is on my list too, but it's not on my 25 and 25 list. Just this one is for the purposes of this. But this is another adult epic fantasy. It's also a dragon fantasy. I'm so excited to see what all the hype is about Philip C. Quantrell. I have to like learn where everything is again on my shelves. I'm very confused. Literally right next to me. But the next book on my list is The Will of the Many by James Islington. The sequel has in fact been announced for this one now. I think it's called The Strength of the Few. So now that we have a second book in sight, I'm really excited to pick up this first book. I know a lot of people have compared it to Red Rising, which is a series that I just love so much. So I have no doubt that I'm going to end up enjoying this one too. I love anything with a school setting. I love anything where there is an underdog that's kind of infiltrating a corrupt society and trying to revolutionize from within. And I think that this will really just speak to me on a deep level. I cannot wait to read it. Next on my list is The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, and it's translated by Ken Liu, who is the author of The Dandelion Dynasty. So Andrew and I watched the Three-Body Problem adaptation on Netflix last year. I want to say it was in November. Yeah, it was November. And we literally watched it in like 2 days because it was so good. So ever since then, I've basically been dying to read this book, and this is sci-fi, so it definitely falls into the category of things that I really want to prioritize next year. And I'm pleased to say that I actually started reading this book on January 1st. I'm about 70 something pages in, and I'm really enjoying it so far. It's pretty close to the Netflix adaptation so far, though I did hear that they have made a ton of changes from what's actually in the book. The one thing that I will say is that the names are like a little bit tough for me to follow, but I think that I'll, keep picking more of it up as I keep going. And I think so far, like, it's really well written, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a new favorite for me. Next on my list is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. This is a super beloved book. Everyone always constantly raves about it, and I tried reading it last year, but I think it just wasn't the right time for me, and I really want to give this one another shot. So this is 100% making my list. Part of the reason why I think that I'll be more successful with it if I'm spending more time on it is that I was obsessed with Glokta's perspective. I really enjoyed everything that I read from his perspective, and it was really some of the other characters, it was really really the Knight, honestly. The Knight just like drove me nuts, and I just did not care about that dude. So I think if I like push through his parts, I will have a better time reading this. I'm gonna do that this time around. So Blade itself, next one on the list. It's happening in fall this year. Next on my list is probably the biggest book on this list, and that is The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. This is the first book in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. It is the book series that inspired Game of Thrones, which ended up being my favorite book of last year. So I feel like I owe it to myself to read the inspiration behind that. I really love medieval fantasy. That is just the fantasy that I've always enjoyed the most. So anything that has that like old fantasy feel to it is something that really appeals to me. And I think that I'm going to really love this one. Super, super excited. Again, this is a gorgeous broken binding edition. This artwork is just so good. So here's the thing. I love the original covers of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series, and I had like the mass market paperback of one, but it's impossible to find those in hardcover, so I feel like these are like the next best thing. But I just really love those old fantasy covers. Like some of them can be a little bit goofy, but I just think that they're so much better than any fantasy covers that are currently coming out today. Give me that old, colorful, like saturated, you know, just like whimsical fantasy feel. I just love those. So really excited to have this one, really excited to read this one, and I'm excited to see if I can draw any parallels between this and Game of Thrones. Next on my list is Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. This is the first book in the Malazan series. I'm really excited to start this endeavor. I have this cute little mass market paperback version that I'm holding up while I wait for my copies of the broken binding to come in. They made beautiful editions of the first 3 books in the series, but they had some delays with the design and shipping and everything. I think that they are on track to ship them kind of soon. It's just that they got delayed again, like with the holiday season. So really looking forward to having those, really hoping that I'm going to love this. This world is very heavily inspired by D&D, and I think that I'm going to love it. I know people have often talked about how it's like a very complicated series. There's a lot of characters to keep track of. It's just a lot, but I tend to like books that are like that, so I'm really hopeful that this could potentially be a new favorite for me. It's always intimidated me, but I'm like, this is the year that it's happening. Next on my list is Sword of Kayn by M.L. Wang. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy. It looks so good. It's gotten the best reviews from like so many people. I have like a really nice edition. It's the Wraithmarked edition. I'm really excited to read this one. I actually read the first chapter of it last year and I loved it. And the only reason that I didn't keep reading it is because I was reading the first chapter of a couple of books to see what it was that pulled me in the most. It ended up being Game of Thrones. That ended up being what I continued with, but this was like a super close second. Like I was almost between Game of Thrones and Sword of Kayn, and I ended up going with Game of Thrones, so I know that when I do read this, I'm gonna really love it. The next book on my list is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. So again, he was the translator for The Three-Body Problem, and now this is his own book series, which I've heard amazing things about. I've heard that the first book kind of reads a bit like history, and then it's really like the second book where things get going. So I'm pretty excited to check this one out. I really don't know much about what it entails, like by any stretch of the imagination. I'm looking forward to finding out because people have just spoken about how beautifully written it is. And honestly, I feel like most of the time, if the writing is really good, it just does not even matter to me what the topic is. As long as you can write beautifully, you'll capture my attention. So I'm also potentially going to buddy read this with my friend Alexa because both of us bought these editions at the same time and we are both really excited to read it, and we both have it on our list of books to read in 2025, so it makes sense to read it together. Next up is A Clash of Kings by George R. R. Martin. This is the second book in the Game of Thrones series. As I mentioned, A Game of Thrones was my favorite book of last year, and I'm really looking forward to continuing in this series. I have characters that I just love so much. Like I feel so fiercely protective of them, and I'm really excited to see how their stories are going to evolve over the course of the next book, and then 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 I'll be, you know, waiting along with everyone else for Winds of Winter, which feels like it is never going to come, but I don't care. I love the first book so much. It doesn't I mean, it bothers me that it's unfinished, but I also just loved it so much, like loved the first book so much that I don't care. I'd rather be caught up and be in a waiting limbo than not read this amazing series at all. So that's where I stand. Next on my list is Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. I hopefully will end up reading this one pretty early on in the year. The only reason that I haven't yet is because I still have to read the final Wax and Wayne book, The Lost Metal. I have an inkling that there are ties between that book and Stormlight Archive, and I don't want to go into this one without having read The Lost Metal. So that's really the only reason that I feel like I'm like the only booktuber that hasn't read Wind and Truth yet, and that's the reason why I really want to just make sure that I'm like caught up on the Cosmere before I jump into this one, because I want to see all of the connections that I possibly can. But I'm really excited about it. I know it's gotten like some mixed reviews. Like I've seen it be some people's favorite book of the year. I've seen people put it on their most disappointing book of the year list. So I'm really curious to see like how I'm going to feel about it and how the story is going to kind of wrap up for some of my favorite characters, and also the inklings of where the series is going to kind of go from here, because while this does wrap up the first story arc, we are going to get another 5 books in the Stormlight Archive series. The next one's not coming until 2030 according to the state of Sanderson, so we've got like a really long time before that even happens, but nonetheless, I'm excited to see how things are gonna kind of play out. Next on my list is Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. This is one that I did really want to read last year in 2024, but the only reason that I didn't is because I was really hoping that we were gonna get a release date for Red God, which is the final book in the series. It felt like Morningstar was a good place to pause in the series. I really loved like the first 3 Red Rising books so much. I binge read them back to back. Like I was like, nothing else exists to me. It's just these books. I had been like nervous that the same thing would happen with this second set of the saga. So I'd been like kind of waiting for us to get some news about Red God. Feeling ready. Like I really want to get back into this world. So I'm just gonna do it and just gonna read it. Just gonna see what happens. I'm like super hopeful that we'll get Red God news, even if we get it like during this year, if it comes out toward the end of the year or like beginning of next year, that's fine. I'll get caught up. I'll be excited to jump into it when everyone else is. But yeah, I think I just need to like continue on my journey because I loved the first 3 books so much. Next is a book that I debated putting on my list, but it is sci-fi. It is one that I want to read, because here's the thing. I loved Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio, the first book in the Sun Eater series, like really loved it. And then the second book, I really struggled with. Like it took me so long to get into it. The beginning, there was such like a big time jump and like all of these new characters, and we didn't really have any explanation for like a bit about what was going on. And I just like didn't really care about them at the beginning. I just wanted to get back to like the people that I knew and loved from book 1. I really struggled with that one, but then at the 75% mark or something, like it really picked up. It got really good. I was so invested, and I really loved the end of book 2. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and read book 3. So Demon in White is the next book. Initially, I had been like, I think I'm done with the series. You know, I was considering not continuing, but I think I really want to give it the old college try and try to read the 3rd book, see how I feel about the 3rd book, because I know people say that it just keeps getting like better and better with each book, which I didn't feel that way about the 2nd one, but I'm hoping that I'll feel that way about the 3rd one and then continue to love the series and see where it's going to progress. I believe the series is actually ending at the end of this year. Sorry, we're in 2025. The end of this year. So if I end up liking it, if I end up getting caught up on it, I think that'll be really great. And I'm really hopeful that I will have a better experience with book 3 than I did with book 2. Next on my list is another sci-fi book, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. This is another one that I've wanted to read for a really long time, and I just feel like the time is now. Like I'm just ready. I watched Dune Part 1. And I enjoyed it, but I think I would have liked it a lot better if I had had all of the context from like reading the book first. So I've been waiting to watch Dune Part 2 until I actually read this. Then I'll rewatch 1 and, watch 2 right after, but really think I'm going to enjoy this. Everyone has told me that I would love this book. Luke, my brother, has read it and he really loves it. He's been pushing it on me for a long time. Same with 3 Body Problem, actually. He's been trying to get me to read both of those books, and now I'm finally reading one of them. So I'm going to read Dune as well, and I think that he'll be really pleased about that. I'm really hoping that I will end up loving this book. Oh, actually one more sci-fi. The next one on my list, which I don't have a physical copy of, but I own the ebook, is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is another one that is like super quintessential, just sci-fi. Like, I feel like most people know Hyperion. If you've never read it, you've definitely seen the cover. It's one of those ones that is just like a classic that is constantly referenced in things, and really hopeful that I'm going to enjoy this one as well. And the Broken Binding is actually doing a special edition of this one in 2025, and I really want to get to it before they announce that so I can see if I need to spring for a pretty copy. Next up is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy. I'm going to be continuing on my Realm of the Elderlings journey, which I'm very excited about. I have never read a Robin Hobb book and been like disappointed that I read a Robin Hobb book. Her books are very dense and they take me a long time to read, but her character work is just unparalleled, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to Fitz and the Fool. I read Live Ship Traders this last year in 2024. I'll be going back to like Buckkeep, the section of the world that I really love the most. So I'm pretty excited for this, and if I can read more than one Robin Hobb trilogy per year, that would be so awesome. I kind of like savor her books, and I have been reading one trilogy a year, but if I can go for more, I do want to do that. Next on my list is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This is another one that I really did want to read in 2024, and I just didn't get around to it. I read the first book in the series, the novella called The Fall, read it in one sitting. It was so good, couldn't put it down, and I have no doubt that I'm gonna really enjoy the rest of this series too, but it's just a matter of actually picking up book one. This was actually another one where I think I read the first chapter, really liked it, but ultimately decided to read Game of Thrones. Very excited to finally start reading these. I think the penultimate book is coming out in 2025. I believe Ryan said perhaps sometime around March. These actually got picked up too. They're going to be traditionally published, but thankfully he's also going to be continuing to publish the indie editions so that you can get matching editions if you have the indie editions. So that's pretty nice. But yeah, very excited to keep going. Love a medieval fantasy worlds. All right, we're up to number 18, so we're getting close to the end. But the next one on my list is Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This involves me rereading The Lies of Locke Lamora, which I loved. I gave it 5 stars when I read it, but it was so many years ago. It was before I really read much adult fantasy, and I'm so curious to see if my opinion will change at all now that I am much more of an adult fantasy reader. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And then really excited to finally continue on, read the next book, and then read the book after this too, The Republic of Thieves. I know that they're all kind of written so that you can read them as, like, each book does wrap things up, so it's not like you're waiting and there's a cliffhanger, which is good because there's still no word on when the 4th book is coming out, but I do really want to just get caught up on these, so that's going to be a priority, and I'm looking forward to that reread very much. Next is perhaps the shortest book on my list, and that is Jade Shards by Fonda Lee. This is a collection of 4 novellas. All of them are novellas that take place in the same world as the Greenbone Saga, which that's one of my favorite series of all time. I love the Greenbone Saga, and I think that the only reason I haven't read this yet is because I just like don't want it to end. I've been like hanging on to the fact that like I still have a little bit that I haven't read yet, but I do really want to finally get to it this year. I did read the other novella too, The Jade Setter of Janloon. I really enjoyed that too, but this is like the characters that I know and love from the main series, and I miss them. And once Andrew is like completely caught up on the Cosmere, because that's his focus right now, I think this is the series that I want him to read next. So I think it'll be fun to read this like around the same time as when he starts delving into Greenbone Saga. Next up is The Song Rising by Samantha Shannon. This is the new updated text edition. It's also the Broken Binding edition. If you can't tell, I've got a lot of Broken Binding editions on this list here. I really want to get caught up on my Broken Binding backlist. But I read books 1 and 2 last year, really enjoyed both of them, so I'm really looking forward to continuing with the series. This one is actually much shorter than the first 2 felt like, so I'm curious to see like why that is, what's going to happen in this one. And then I do want to read the next book as well. And the 5th book comes out in February. So once that's out, then I'll be caught up and ready to read them as they're released. But I really, really enjoyed books 1 and 2. So I think I'm really going to love book 3. I had this one on hold at my library for like the ebook copy, and I just got a notification that it came in. So it's potentially the like 2nd or 3rd book that I'm going to end up reading in January. Not 100% sure, but like fairly certain it's happening very soon. Okay, so the next book on my list is actually downstairs on my night table, and I'm going to just show the next book in the series, but that is The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. So The Shadow Rising is actually the book that's on this list, so I'm just like holding this up. This is my little like placeholder, but Shadow Rising is the book on the list. I really want to make more progress in Wheel of Time this year. I've been reading The Shadow Rising like forever, and I really would like to finish it out and to continue on, because I do really like the world like very much. I've actually kind of even been wanting to go back and like reread the first couple of books since I did love them so much, but I know that I like shouldn't do that. I really should just like finish the series before I go back and reread the ones that I've already read. So for that reason, I'm gonna finish Shadow Rising this year. If I get to The Fires of Heaven too, like that would be awesome, but finishing Shadow Rising is a really high priority for me. Next on my list is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is one that has gotten such amazing reviews that I'm really looking forward to checking it out for myself. This is the first book in the Library trilogy, and the final book, book 3, which I think is called The Book That Broke Her Heart, is due to be released later in 2025. So I like the idea of having a completed series on this list. I do have a lot of unfinished series on here. There are some that are completed, but adding another completed one would be really nice. So that's why this book has made it. This again is a broken binding edition, and I just am so drawn to these covers. They're so like dark academia, and like I just love the whole color scheme, and like the gold foiling is just beautiful. I'm really excited to delve into this world. Then we've got another dragon fantasy, and that is Ascendant by Michael R. Miller. Again, we've got a broken binding edition. Actually, this one I ordered specifically because the naked hardback is like unbelievably stunning, so I'm just going to show it to you. Just look at that. Like, I love that so much. So anyway, and the dragon egg too. The dragon egg is also super cool. But this book is more of like a YA dragon fantasy than an adult fantasy. This one feels more in the vein of that like old school kind of fantasy, or Aragon. I think Aragon is probably the closest like comparison to this one. I'm excited. I've heard really good things about it, and I think it'll be a good, I don't want to say palate cleanser book. Knowing that it is more of a YA book, I think it will be like an easier read than some of the other books on my list. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really hoping that I'm going to end up loving it. Then we've got Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. This is the first book in the Empire of the Vampire series. There is one book left to come out, and Jay Kristoff posted a teaser about it the other day saying that it's coming in 2025, like the end of 2025, I think, knowing that it is now going to be finished, because he had originally said that it would take like a really long time to publish these between books. So now that we have like confirmation that the 3rd book is going to be in fact coming really soon, I really want to get invested in this world, find out what's going on here. I love vampires. I'm excited for a more like adult, more epic kind of fantasy take on vampires, and I'm just really hopeful. Like, I've heard really great things about this series. I just really hope I'm going to be one of the people that loves it. This one's an Illumicrate edition. And then last on my list is Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the first, I was going to say first book, but it's technically the first 2 books in the Varia Revelations series, and these follow Royce and Hadrian. I've heard great things about these. More that they're just like really fun and they're kind of quick reads, which sounds good based on the amount of like the page count that I have in front of me on all the other books that I listed. So I'm really excited to get into these. I have been wanting to read them for years and I just never have. So I feel like it's finally like I just got it. I just have to do it. Like, you know, these again are more like medieval fantasy, and I have really high hopes that I will end up loving these. So those are all of the books on my list. That's quite a few that I had to talk about, and this ended up being long since I gave you such a big update at the beginning. Despite it being the year of the snake, I would say that this is my year of the dragon, because so many of the books on my lists are just full of dragons, which is really exciting. I think this is going to be potentially one of my best reading years ever, which is like nerve-wracking to say in January, but like I really, really, truly feel that way. Like I want to just, I don't know, have like a reminder for myself somewhere to just like stay focused and like keep reading these books that I really want to read, put in the time, know that I'm going to end up finding so many new favorites, because I feel like last year I ended up reading a lot of books that were like quick books, and my average rating for the year was like so much lower than it ever really was before. And it's because I was reading things quickly, but I wasn't really enjoying what I was reading. So I want to just do a 180 on that and just read things that are going to take time and that I'm going to really love. So that's my list. Let me know what books you're prioritizing for 2025, and I will see you guys soon in a new video. Bye!